just about to have a shower, hence the towel. And this time, I wanted to talk about the differences in culture with soccer, with football in America compared to where I'm from, the UK. So, first things first, soccer is not the number one sport here. From my experience, I've had a lot of work dealing with kids ranging from 6 to I'd say about 12 mostly here in the States. And you can clearly see that there's enthusiasm that's unmatched from the kids back home. The kids back home, they grew up with football, they know it very well. They can get into a conversation about the big game last night, or they can talk transfers to you. Football is everywhere back home, and obviously because of FIFA, that other soccer games, that's made it more child friendly. So kids are learning obscure players that they probably wouldn't have known 10 years ago or more, where now they're getting wider access to kind of world football. So that's what I've noticed back home. Kids are very knowledgeable on the wider on the world game. However, kids over here in the States aren't so hot on that kind of thing. Their enthusiasm is much more based around playing and participating, and they want to kick the soccer ball. That's as simple as that. If you can get them kicking, they're happy, they're smiling. Again, the kids in the same age bracket that I mentioned, their knowledge of the game, of the world game, is probably non-existent or very limited at the least. They can tell you the odd player name, but they can't tell you which team they play in. They don't have favourite teams. They will switch teams at the drop of a hat. So if Barcelona win the Clasico, they're Barcelona fans, but if Real Madrid win the league, they become Real Madrid fans. Some of the kids don't even know some of the rules, so that is something that can help build into their understanding, especially at younger ages. But what I find probably most interesting is the terminology from other American sports that creeps into soccer language. So it's interesting, like for instance, hockey, you have defenders who are known as defensemen. You'll hear parents, they'll say, "Oh yeah, that we haven't got enough defensemen," or this very specific language from other sports infiltrates its way into soccer. And like another one is like a line of substitutes. So for instance, like in hockey, substitutes roll on and off very regularly and in quite high numbers as well compared to football. So that would be known as a line. So a group of players coming off and on, that's a line being changed. So people, parents, players, they'll comment like, "Oh, he does his lines strange," or he always picks his best players in his lines. So again, just small little things like this are very interesting to observe. I mean, that shows me that soccer is not taken as seriously amongst the American sports here. It's definitely gaining momentum. It's gaining respect from both players and parents. I'd go as far as to say that it's probably up there, if not the number one fastest growing sport in the States right now, from what I can see and what I've read. It's interesting to see if there will be a cultural shift, basically, because what this nation knows is obviously American football, baseball, hockey, basketball, almost in that order as well. So, can we say whether soccer will creep into that mix? Time will tell. But I think with the current generation of players who are playing, similar to back home, they're starting to play FIFA now. They're starting to watch more games now. And it's not as widespread and it's not across the board, but kids are starting to recognize soccer in its own right. And there's a lot of kids who I've had contact time with who are deadly serious about soccer. They want to play at the highest level that they can, whether that's a college scholarship or going pro, lining up for the national team, which is a big thing here. Kids are really starting to respect the idea that soccer is a actual career path now, whereas before that definitely wasn't seen that way, and it was probably seen even up to about 3-4 years ago, when I first came out here. It it was probably seen mostly as a female sport, whereas I wouldn't say that's the case now. But it still is primarily favoured by females here, which is again interesting compared to back home. Obviously, soccer or football it's a sport played by males primarily, although numbers of female participants are growing, which is good to see. And obviously, the World Cup currently being played in Canada has garnered a lot of attention, and rightly so, back home with the England team doing so well. So there's no doubt that in terms of knowledge of the game, of the rules, it's all still very much in its infancy in terms of numbers across the nation. There will be some pockets where soccer is definitely the main sport amongst kids and even adults, and then there's some pockets where soccer is unheard of. It's literally just started or it's very new. So it will take time for these young kids, this generation of children, to really take soccer forward for the States. But I'm sure within 20 years we will start seeing very technical players. I think it's fair to say that in previous tournaments at the World Cup, we've seen a very physically fit US national side. I think they've been in consecutive World Cups since Italia 90, and from there they have definitely improved year or competition to competition. However, you would say that their game is based on their physicality and more specifically their endurance. There was an interesting documentary I think I saw on YouTube, someone showed me. The cameras were given access to Jurgen Klinsmann's pre-season camp going into Brazil at this World Cup, just gone last year. And straight off the bat, there was a there was a bleep test. It was like, wow, that was interesting. That for me, like Klinsmann's main emphasis and the US's emphasis was like, let's get our fitness right first and foremost. So it's interesting that they've always tried to plan their teams and plan their strategies based on having a very high level of fitness, but that eventually it finds itself out. And I think if they're to go forward, they'll need to improve their technical and tactical qualities. And like I said, just to reiterate, I think in time it will come. But very interesting to see how it's still growing, still kind of seen as the fancy girly sport amongst some people, but it's starting to make its own name for itself. So that pleases me. So anyway, we'll see how soccer progresses here in this country.